Have you ever noticed that the people we think about the most are the ones who never had to earn that space in our mind? Here's the paradox. A woman can fall in love with a man through silence alone, not his words, not his actions, just the way he lives inside her imagination. But here is the shocking truth. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, three things begin happening to him long before he even realizes it. And if you stay with me, because when you watch this till the end, you will finally understand the secret. You are not chasing him. Your mind is chasing the version of you that you forgot to become. You are a queen. Start acting like one. Her thoughts signal his instincts. There is something mysterious, almost ancient, about the way a woman's thoughts reach a man long before her words ever do. It is not logic. It is not intention. It is not desire spoken aloud. It is the silent movement of her inner world. And for reasons even she may not understand, it travels. A woman can sit alone, in the quiet, with her head leaning against her hand, wondering why she keeps returning to him. Why the memory of his voice, or his smile, or even his existence keeps surfacing like waves that refuse to rest. And she may think it ends there, inside her, hidden, contained, invisible. But what she does not realize is this: thoughts carry energy, and energy carries presence, and presence is felt even by the one who believes he is numb, even by the one who acts unbothered, even by the one who says he does not know what he wants. He feels something, not clearly enough to name it, but deeply enough to react to it. He notices a shift in his own mood, a sudden change in his own attention, a subtle tug in the back of his mind that whispers, something is pulling you, pay attention. He may not think it is her, but something inside him stirs, because a woman's emotional field is not still water, it is a tide. When she thinks of him often, intensely, with genuine emotional frequency, that tide begins to reach his shores. And here is what becomes even more profound. She doesn't have to speak, she doesn't have to text, she doesn't have to initiate. Her energy travels ahead of her actions. There are men who will suddenly feel restless without knowing why. Men who will think of someone they have not spoken to in days. Men who will feel a faint warmth rise inside them, as if a whisper told them, you are being remembered. A woman's thought is not a passive thing. It is a quiet force. And when that force consistently returns to the same person, something ancient in him responds. His instincts awaken. His awareness sharpens. His emotional radar activates. He feels the presence of something subtle, soft, yet persistent. And he begins to sense that somewhere in the quiet spaces of her heart, he is being held. Most women underestimate the power of their inner world. They underestimate how deeply intuitive men actually are. They underestimate how connected the human heart can be, even without words. When she thinks of him with longing, he may feel a gentle pull. When she thinks of him with uncertainty, he may feel a strange discomfort. When she thinks of him with intensity, he may feel an invisible pressure. And when she thinks of him with pure sincerity, he may feel a softness within himself that he thought he had lost. Because thoughts are not isolated. They are invitations. They are vibrations. They are silent messages crossing invisible bridges. And yet, this is only the beginning, because once he senses her energy, something even more powerful happens next. A shift, not in him, but in what he notices. And that leads us into what comes after this. 2. He feels her absence more intensely. You would think that the man feels her most when she is present. But that is not how the human heart works. It is not her presence he feels first. It is her absence. Absence has a way of echoing louder than words, louder than affection, louder than every moment she gave him freely. When a woman cannot stop thinking about a man, she often withdraws into the depth of her emotions. She becomes quieter, more observant, more inward. Her attention turns into contemplation. Her warmth becomes introspection. To her, it may feel like she is simply overthinking, but to him, it feels like something suddenly went missing. Men are far more attuned to emotional shifts than they outwardly show. They may not have the language for it, but they have the instinct, and instinct tells them when a familiar energy is no longer circling around them the way it used to. He starts noticing the absence of her messages, the absence of her presence, the absence of her laughter, the absence of her emotional warmth. Even if she never expressed her thoughts aloud, he could feel them. And when those thoughts turn inward, he feels the shift. This is where the paradox begins. The more she thinks about him, the quieter she becomes toward him. She is not withholding. She is processing. She is feeling deeply. She is navigating emotional currents that he does not yet see. But he feels the silence, not the silence of indifference, the silence of emotional weight. And silence has texture. Silence has presence. Silence has meaning. Her quiet begins to create a new awareness inside him. He becomes more sensitive to the lack of her energy. He begins noticing small things he once ignored. He becomes more aware of her distance than he ever was of her closeness. This is what absence does. It amplifies value. Her absence is like the moment the sun suddenly goes behind the clouds. You don't realize how warm it was until the warmth disappears. Even men who appear emotionally unaffected cannot escape the gravity of absence, because absence forces reflection, it forces realization, it forces confrontation with feelings they would rather avoid. And so he begins to feel the weight of what is missing, even if he does not admit it. He wonders why he is thinking about her at odd moments, why his mind returns to her unexpectedly, why her presence lingers in the spaces she no longer occupies. It is not that she has disappeared, it is that she has shifted her emotional center inward. And men feel that shift as a form of loss. But this loss is not punishment. It is awakening. Absence makes him notice the one thing he had grown too comfortable with, the fact that she was emotionally available, and when emotional availability fades, even slightly, a man begins to feel an unfamiliar emptiness. He may not understand it, he may not articulate it, he may not even acknowledge, but he feels it. And it is this feeling, this deep, unspoken awareness of her absence, that sets the stage for something much more transformative. Because when absence becomes noticeable, curiosity begins to rise. And curiosity, that is where everything changes, which leads us to what happens next. 3. His curiosity begins to rise. Curiosity is not born from comfort. Curiosity is born from disruption, from imbalance, from the quiet yet undeniable sense that something has shifted. When she cannot stop thinking about him, her energy changes, her silence deepens, her presence becomes more internal, and he feels the space between them expand. This expansion is what awakens curiosity in him. Curiosity makes him wonder, where did she go? What is she thinking? Why do I feel her less than before? Why am I noticing her so much, now that she is silent? Curiosity is not a loud emotion. It doesn't knock, it whispers. And men always hear the whisper, because the mind always seeks what the heart feels missing. At first, it feels like a thought passing through him. A glance at her social media. A moment of wondering if she is okay. A flicker of memory. But curiosity grows. Slowly, steadily, naturally. And with every passing hour or day, it becomes harder for him to ignore. He begins to notice how long it has been since they last spoke. He begins replaying their last conversation in his mind. He begins wondering if she is thinking about him. He begins questioning whether he should reach out. This is the pivotal moment, when emotional energy shifts direction, when the pull she once felt begins moving toward him, because curiosity is the seed of pursuit. And pursuit is the seed of value. A man does not chase what he fully understands. He chases what he cannot fully grasp. And her emotional shift, quiet, subtle, internal, creates a beautiful mystery around her. Not a calculated mystery, not a manipulative mystery, a natural mystery. The mystery of a woman who is gentle yet self-contained, open yet grounded, emotional yet sovereign. She is not disappearing. She is not playing games. She is simply returning to herself because her thoughts became too heavy to leave outside her body. And men feel the difference between a woman who is silent because she is hurt and a woman who is silent because she is awakening. This kind of silence draws him in. This kind of silence makes him curious. This kind of silence makes him pay attention, because men are drawn to women whose minds they cannot predict and whose emotions they cannot fully read. Her stillness begins to feel magnetic. Her absence begins to feel intriguing. Her self-focus begins to feel beautiful. And curiosity grows until it becomes action. Until he reaches out, until he checks in, until he starts showing effort that he once felt no urgency to offer. But this is not the end of the process. It is the threshold. Because curiosity is not the final transformation. It is only the doorway through which the next revelations unfold. And those revelations will shape what he does next, how he values her, and whether he chooses to rise or retreat. The next keynote, the one that follows curiosity, is where everything truly begins to shift. And that is where the story continues. 4. A woman's focus is a man's mirror. There is a quiet truth about human connection that many never learn until life teaches it to them. Harshly, people respond not to what you say, but to the energy behind what you feel. A woman's focus, her deep inner attention, becomes a mirror, not a mirror of his image, but a mirror of his potential, his fears, his insecurities, and his desires. When she focuses on him, something in him awakens to reflect that image back, often without conscious awareness. If her mind holds him with warmth, he feels safer around her. If her mind carries doubt, he senses instability. If her mind is clouded with longing, he feels a pull he cannot fully explain. Her inner world paints the emotional tone of the connection. This is why a woman's focus is priceless. It is not her beauty that shapes a relationship. It is her awareness, her emotional center, her silent attention. Men are far more intuitive than they show. Even emotionally guarded men feel the subtle shifts in her energy, the tone of her voice, the way she responds, the silence between her words, the lingering thoughts she tries to hide. He senses when she is leaning in emotionally, even if she is quiet. He feels when she is uncertain, even if she smiles. He notices when she is overthinking, even if she says she's fine, because emotional focus is not something a woman can disguise. It leaks through the spaces between her sentences. It appears in the rhythm of her presence. It radiates from her spirit. When her focus is calm and balanced, he feels steadier around her. He doesn't know why. He simply feels grounded in her presence. But when her focus becomes chaotic, when she spirals between longing and insecurity, he feels a strange emotional noise around her. She doesn't mean to project it. She doesn't intend to create emotional turbulence. But her inner world becomes a storm, and storms create reactions, not because he is insensitive, but because he is receptive. A woman's mind is a powerful field, and many don't realize how much influence it has until they watch a man shift in response to emotions she never spoke aloud. This is why self-awareness matters so deeply. A woman doesn't have to be perfect. She just has to be present, grounded, connected to herself, because her focus becomes the emotional blueprint of how he shows up. A woman's attention becomes a kind of mirror that reveals him to himself. If she sees his potential, he may rise. If she sees only his flaws, he may shrink. If she pours too much of her focus into him, he may become overwhelmed by a responsibility he does not understand. And this is where many women confuse effort with energy. They try to love harder, care more, invest deeper, thinking that intensity will make the connection flourish. But intensity often creates imbalance. When a woman focuses on him more than herself, the mirror begins to distort. He doesn't see her clearly anymore. He only sees the reflection of what she feels lacking within herself. This is why emotional balance is not optional. It is the foundation, because once she realizes that her focus shapes the connection, she also realizes that where she places her focus determines the direction the relationship grows. But here is the deeper truth. If her focus becomes too heavy, if her emotions become too loud, if her heart becomes too invested too soon, something else begins to happen inside him. Something subtle, something unspoken, something he would never admit openly. He begins to feel a quiet pressure, and that pressure is where the next transformation begins. 5. When she can't let go, he feels safe. There is a tenderness in the way a woman holds on, not out of neediness, not out of desperation, but out of the depth of her heart. Her staying is emotional, spiritual, intuitive, a kind of loyalty that forms even before she realizes it. When a woman can't let go of a man, it is not simply because she wants him. It is because she feels something real, something meaningful, something that ties her spirit to his, in a way she cannot fully articulate. And men can feel this, even when it is unspoken, even when she hides it behind calmness, even when she pretends she is unaffected. Her attachment, gentle or intense, creates a sense of emotional security for him. Because a woman's emotional consistency is something rare in a world full of temporary affection. He may not show it, but he feels a safety in knowing. He occupies space in her mind. He feels steadier knowing she thinks of him. He feels valued knowing she cannot easily forget him. It's not that he wants to take advantage of her loyalty. It's that his soul rests more when he knows he is emotionally significant to someone. For men, emotional significance is grounding. Her inability to let go becomes a signal. You matter here. You're not invisible here. There is a place for you here. And men respond to feeling valued, far more than they respond to feeling desired. Desire excites them. Value stabilizes them. A woman who holds on, not through clinging, but through sincerity, creates a sense of emotional continuity. To him, it feels like coming home, to a place he didn't know he needed. But there is a shadow side to this as well. Because when a woman holds on too tightly, something else rises within him simultaneously: comfort and complacency. He may begin to assume that she will always be there. He may begin to rely on the certainty of her emotional presence. He may begin to feel less urgency to invest or pursue, not because he doesn't care, but because he feels safe. And safety can sometimes make people slow down their emotional effort. But here is where it gets even more complicated. The moment she begins feeling that she can't let go, she often begins projecting her fears onto him. Fears he can feel, even when she tries to hide them. The fear of losing him. The fear of not being enough. The fear of falling deeper than he is ready for. The fear of giving too much and receiving too little. And the more she fears losing him, the more he senses an unspoken intensity. At first, this intensity makes him feel valued, but soon, if it grows too loud, it becomes pressure. And pressure is something men feel, even when they cannot explain it. A woman can be perfectly loving in her words, and still overwhelming in her energy. This is why emotional self-awareness is essential, not to suppress her heart, but to balance it. To keep it open without losing herself. To love without letting fear dilute the purity of her affection. Because when fear sits beside love, the connection becomes heavy, and that heaviness creates a turning point. The moment a man begins to feel that her emotional world is leaning too heavily on him, he begins responding not to her love, but to her pressure. And that shift from love to pressure is subtle, but powerful, because that pressure is what leads directly into the next unfolding truth. The weight of her overthinking is felt in his silence. 6. Her overthinking creates invisible pressure. Overthinking is not loud. It does not scream. It does not break anything outwardly. Overthinking whispers. Overthinking tightens the breath. Overthinking changes the tone of her presence in ways she cannot see, but he can feel. A woman who overthinks is not weak. She is simply deep. She feels more, she notices more, she cares more. Her heart runs ahead of her mind because she loves from the soul, not from the surface. But this depth has a consequence. When her thoughts begin circling him, like constellations that refuse to shift, her energy becomes heavy, intense, pressured. She does not mean to send that intensity outward. She does not intend to weigh the connection down. But her worry spills into the spaces between her words. Her fear hides behind her questions. Her longing appears in her timing. Her uncertainty lives in her silence. And men, even emotionally distant men, can sense invisible pressure. They may not understand the source, but they feel the weight. They feel it in the way she pauses, in the way she waits too long for his replies, in the way her tone subtly changes, in the way her presence grows both eager and anxious. Pressure does not live in words. It lives in the emotional frequency beneath the words. And here is the deepest truth. The more she overthinks, the more he feels responsible for emotions he did not intentionally activate. Men fear emotional responsibility when they feel unprepared. It is not her depth that scares him. It is the expectation hiding behind it. Expectation she never voiced. Expectation she never meant to create. Expectation she didn't even know existed within her. But he feels it. And this invisible pressure creates an emotional tension that neither of them fully understands. It is not her love pushing him away. It is her fear. It is not her presence overwhelming him. It is her expectation. It is not her depth that becomes too much. It is the unspoken demand for certainty that rises from her overthinking. Overthinking is not the enemy. Fear is. And fear has a way of shaping her energy in ways she never intended. But here is where the transformation begins. Because once she recognizes that her mind is creating the heaviness, not her heart, she can begin to shift the energy back into balance. She can breathe again. She can think clearly again. She can reconnect with herself again. Because when a woman recenters herself, the pressure dissolves, the heaviness lifts, the energy becomes light again, soft again, attractive again. And that emotional lightness creates a completely different reaction in him. Because the moment the pressure disappears, he begins to return. He begins to lean in. He begins to feel safe. He begins to feel drawn to her again, without understanding why. And that shift, the shift from pressure to peace, opens the door to the next transformation of the connection. A transformation that begins the moment she realizes that she does not need to chase him. She only needs to return to herself. 7. He starts testing his value. There comes a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when a man begins to measure himself against the weight of your presence. Not because you demanded anything from him, but because something in him wakes up when he realizes he is in the orbit of a woman who knows herself, a woman who is not reaching, not chasing, not convincing, a woman who is simply being whole, steady, rooted in her sense of worth. When a man senses this, something shifts inside him. He starts questioning himself in ways he rarely admitted before. Am I enough? Do I bring value? Do I stand tall in her eyes? Or am I shrinking in my own? He begins to test himself. not you. He becomes more aware of his strengths, his inconsistencies, his gaps. He watches his words more carefully. He pays closer attention to his effort. He becomes more mindful of the energy he brings. Because suddenly your presence reveals something he had forgotten. A man wants to be proud of who he becomes in the presence of a woman he respects. You're not asking him to level up, but your composure, your clarity, your maturity, your emotional discipline, they all become a silent invitation. And silence has a way of exposing truth. A man of depth will rise to meet the standard. A man of ego will run from it. A man of confusion will test boundaries. A man of integrity will test himself. Not to challenge you, but to see whether he can stand beside you without shrinking inside his own reflection. This is where many women misunderstand the shift. They think he's pulling away. They think he's losing interest. They think the change means something is wrong, but often it means something is waking up. He becomes more aware of his flaws, more sensitive to his shortcomings, more unsettled by the ways he has been living on autopilot. When a woman operates from deep self-worth, calm, steady, unbothered, a man suddenly feels the mirror turn toward him. And mirrors don't lie, mirrors don't flatter, mirrors don't negotiate. He starts noticing the contrast between who he is and who he wants to be for a woman like you. This is why he acts differently. Sometimes he becomes more protective. Sometimes he becomes more attentive. Sometimes he becomes more withdrawn, not because he doesn't care, but because he is silently measuring himself. A woman's confidence is not just attractive, it is confronting. It forces a man to see where he stands without her needing to say a word. And this is the moment when something delicate begins. He is no longer evaluating you. He is evaluating himself in relation to you. A man's value is never tested in comfort. It is tested when he stands beside a woman who is not afraid to lose him. That's why your calmness is powerful. It shows him you are not anchored in his opinions of you. You are anchored in your truth. And when a woman stands in her truth, a man must decide if he will stand in his own. Because deep inside every man, there is a desire to be worthy of the woman he chooses, not by her expectation, but by his own inner calling. It's not about competition. It's not about dominance. It's about alignment. The question becomes, can he meet the woman who no longer doubts herself? And this is where you notice another shift, a subtle, invisible moment where the balance of energy begins to move, a whisper that leads to the next awakening, because the moment you shift your thoughts, the entire energetic balance changes. 8. Her thoughts shift the energetic balance. There is a power a woman carries that many never understand, because it is silent, inward, and invisible to the untrained eye. But it is real, it is alive, it is transformative. It is the power of her thoughts. A woman's thoughts do not simply live in her mind. They live in her energy. They live in her eyes, her tone, her presence, her rhythm. They shape how she breathes. They influence how she responds. They guide how she carries herself. When a woman changes the way she thinks, she changes the way she moves. And when she changes the way she moves, the entire dynamic around her shifts. There is a moment when a woman who once doubted herself steps into the quiet knowing of her worth. Not loudly, not dramatically, not with announcements or declarations, but with softness, with certainty, with a calmness that doesn't need validation. She starts thinking differently about herself. I am allowed to expect consistency. I am allowed to receive effort. I am allowed to walk away from confusion. I am allowed to be loved with clarity. I am allowed to choose peace. And the moment her thoughts shift, everything else must adjust. You see, energy is not something mystical or distant. It It is the emotional language beneath every word we speak, beneath every decision we make, beneath every boundary we hold. When your thoughts become clear, your energy becomes unmistakable. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop explaining your worth. You stop asking for what should already be natural. You stop tolerating anything that drains your spirit. You become a woman who lives from fullness rather than lack, and fullness is magnetic. A woman whose thoughts are anchored in self-respect creates an energetic atmosphere where games cannot survive, where manipulation cannot breathe, where inconsistency becomes too heavy to carry. A man can feel this shift, even if you never say a word. Your silence begins to speak for you. Your standards become felt, not spoken. Your boundaries become natural, not forced. Your peace becomes unshakable, not defended. When your thoughts transform, your entire presence becomes a new environment. This is why men suddenly shift when you do. Not because you changed anything externally, but because you changed the inner tone you live from. A woman's inner world is her true kingdom. When she cleans it, strengthens it, and honors it, everything in her outer world reorganizes to match. This is the balance men sense, even if they do not understand it. They feel the difference between a woman who doubts herself and a woman who knows herself. Thoughts carry energy. Energy carries truth. Truth carries power. And the moment you embody this shift, the dynamic between you and him begins to echo a deeper law. Men don't respond to what you say. They respond to what they feel in your energy. And this leads us into the next revelation. A truth that changes every connection. Because in the end, men respond not to the words you speak, but to the emotional reality you create. 9. Men respond to what they feel, not what they hear. Words are easy. Anyone can say the right thing. Anyone can speak beautifully, convincingly, passionately. But energy does not lie. Men don't fall for words. They fall for the feeling behind the words. They fall for presence. They fall for peace. They fall for steadiness. They fall for feminine self-assurance that doesn't beg, cling, or collapse. A man may listen to your words, but he responds to your energy. If your words say, "I'm fine," but your spirit is filled with anxiety, he feels the anxiety. If your words say, "I don't need much," but your energy is starving for validation, he feels the hunger. If your words say, "I trust you," but your energy is guarded, he feels the distance. If your words say, "I'm over it," but your energy clings, he feels the attachment. This is why authenticity matters more than performance. Your energy reveals the truth you cannot speak. A woman who is emotionally anchored creates a feeling of warmth, stability, and depth around her. Not because she is trying to impress him, but because she is at peace with herself. Men are drawn to that peace the way travelers are drawn to shelter in a storm. A woman's emotional tone becomes the atmosphere a man enters. He responds to that atmosphere, consciously or unconsciously. This is why manipulation never works for long. You can speak softly with your mouth while your energy screams insecurity, and he will sense the contradiction. It is also why true feminine power is not loud, not forceful, not demanding. It is grounded. It is self-contained. It is calm. Men respond to the calmness of a woman who knows herself because it makes them feel safe in their masculinity. It invites them to be better without being commanded. It challenges them without shaming them. It inspires them without pressuring them. A man becomes emotionally invested, not because a woman tells him to, but because her presence awakens something inside him. He responds to the feeling she creates, the feeling of being understood, the feeling of being respected, the feeling of being invited rather than controlled. When a woman is emotionally grounded, her energy becomes a soft gravity. She does not chase. She does not fear loss. She does not beg for clarity. She does not collapse into insecurity. She becomes a presence a man naturally gravitates toward, because men don't stay where they feel drained. They stay where they feel inspired, where they feel peace, where they feel the quiet strength of a woman who knows her worth. Remember this truth: a man may forget your words, but he will never forget how your energy made him feel. And when a woman finally learns to master her energy, she unlocks the next level of connection, a deeper layer where something sacred begins to shift. Because when a woman's energy becomes her language, her presence becomes unforgettable. 10. He feels her expectations without her speaking. There is an unspoken language that lives beneath every relationship. A silent rhythm that beats even when no words are exchanged. People call it chemistry, intuition, energy. But whatever we choose to name it, there is no denying that it exists, and it speaks more truth than any sentence ever could. When a woman begins expecting something from a man, even if she never says a word out loud, he feels it, not always consciously, not always clearly, but somewhere within him, a gentle tension begins to rise. He senses a shift in the atmosphere around her, a subtle change in the way she looks, moves, breathes, and reacts. And here's the curious thing: these expectations can be born from hope, or they can be born from fear. They can come from a place of desire or from a place of insecurity. But no matter where they come from, the man senses them long before the woman ever dares to speak them. Because expectations have a weight, not a heavy weight, just the kind that slightly presses against someone's spirit, the kind that nudges at the edges of their awareness, the kind that whispers something has changed when she expects him to call, when she expects him to text, when she expects him to reassure her, when she expects him to be someone he has not yet chosen to be. He feels it as a quiet, invisible pressure, not a demand, but a pull. And even though he may not label it, he instinctively reacts. Sometimes he responds with effort, rising to meet what he senses she desires. Sometimes he withdraws, afraid of disappointing her, afraid of not being enough, afraid of being pushed into a role he did not agree to play. And sometimes, most confusing of all, he freezes, not moving forward, not moving away, caught in the strange space between potential and hesitation. But what most women don't realize is this: her expectations are often not about him at all. They are reflections of the parts of herself she has not fully nurtured. Expectations reveal her wounds, her past disappointments, her longing for certainty, her fear of abandonment, her hunger for validation. She's not always expecting him to show up. Sometimes she is expecting the world to finally treat her right, to finally stay, to finally prove she is worthy, to finally give her the love she's been waiting for. And when a man feels this, even without hearing a single word, it stirs something deep inside him. Because every man knows, in his own way, that expectations are invitations for responsibility. They ask him to step into a position, to offer something meaningful, to deliver something emotional, to be someone dependable. And responsibility is a beautiful thing when it grows naturally, when it is chosen, not forced. But when a man feels like he is being pulled, not by her, but by her unspoken needs, he starts questioning himself. Can I offer her what she's asking for? Am I ready for this? Do I want this responsibility? Or am I stepping into something I can't sustain? And these questions don't always lead him to withdraw. Sometimes they lead him to work harder. Sometimes they lead him to change. Sometimes they lead him to become better. Men rise to meet expectations when those expectations feel spacious, gentle, inspiring. But when expectations feel like emotional tides, constantly shifting, unpredictable, driven by fear, he feels overwhelmed. Not because she is asking too much, but because the unspoken energy feels heavier than her silence admits. This is why emotional awareness is so powerful. Because it is not the expectation itself that shapes the relationship. It is the energy behind it. If the expectation is rooted in love, it invites connection. If it's rooted in insecurity, it invites distance. And once he begins feeling those unspoken expectations, something else begins to awaken inside him. Something subtle, yet incredibly important. He begins reacting to the world inside her, not the world outside her. And that is where the next shift begins, because the moment he starts responding to her emotional landscape, his behavior begins to follow the rhythm of her internal dialogue. 11. His behavior shifts based on her internal dialogue. There is a sacred, almost mystical truth about relationships that many people never fully understand. A man does not respond to a woman's words. He responds to her emotional reality, her fears, her confidence, her doubts, her strengths, her peace, her chaos, her self-love, her self-neglect. He feels these within her long before he consciously interprets them. If her internal dialogue says, "I am not enough," he senses fragility. He senses hesitation. He senses the trembling beneath her smile, and his behavior softens. Not always kindly, sometimes with distance, sometimes with confusion. If her internal dialogue says, "Please don't leave me," he feels the pull of fear, the gravity of attachment, the weight of her longing. He may step closer for a moment, then further the next, because fear creates inconsistent energy. If her internal dialogue says, "I trust myself," he feels the groundedness in her presence, the calm certainty that surrounds her. He finds himself being more honest, more respectful, more straightforward. If her internal dialogue says, "I know my worth," he rises to meet her in that worth. He becomes more intentional, more careful with his actions, more attentive with his presence. A woman's internal dialogue becomes the script he responds to, not her spoken words. Because what she feels, she radiates. And what she radiates, he reacts to, often without knowing why. This is why a woman can say, "I'm fine," but he feels tension. She can say, "It's okay," but he feels distance. She can say, "Do whatever you want," but he feels a warning. She can say, "I don't need anything," but he feels the emptiness behind it. He is not responding to her sentences. He is responding to her soul. This is also why some women never need to ask for commitment. Their internal dialogue already speaks commitment. Their emotional tone says, "I do not chase, I do not beg, I do not cling, I align with what aligns with me." And a man feels this alignment. It shapes his behavior toward her. He senses he must be consistent to stand beside her. He senses he must bring peace, not chaos. He senses he must match her emotional clarity. But when her internal dialogue becomes crowded with doubts, with insecurities, with unhealed wounds, these inner past versions of her begin whispering louder than her present self. And though she may no longer speak these fears aloud, her energy carries them. She becomes a woman who expects disappointment without realizing she expects it. A woman who fears abandonment without realizing she fears it. A woman who anticipates inconsistency without realizing she anticipates it. And a man responds to that internal storm, often mirroring it in his behavior, not because he wants to, but because emotional energy spreads like water on the floor, finding its way into every corner of the connection. This is why some relationships feel like they are sinking, even when neither person understands why. It is not the behavior that collapses the bond. It is the emotional dialogue beneath the behavior. But here lies the deeper truth. A woman's internal dialogue doesn't just influence how he treats her. It influences how she treats herself. And when she treats herself from a place of fear, she begins weakening her own power. Not because anyone took it from her, but because she unknowingly handed it away. And that is where the next transformation begins. Because the moment she starts losing herself in his potential, she begins losing her power. 12. She begins losing her power to his potential. There is a quiet danger that many women fall into, not because they are weak, but because they are compassionate, hopeful, visionary. A woman can see the potential in a man long before he sees it in himself. She can see who he could become, who he might become, who he someday will become. And this is beautiful until it becomes costly. Because when she begins loving his potential more than his reality, she begins abandoning her own. She begins excusing what she should question. She begins tolerating what she should challenge. She begins waiting where she should be walking. She begins hoping where she should be choosing. Slowly, quietly, without noticing, she begins drifting away from herself. Everything she could create, everything she could become, everything she could rise into gets paused because she is investing in what he might be instead of what he is. Potential becomes her addiction. Possibility becomes her illusion. Hope becomes her anchor. And the more she sees what he could be, the less she sees what she needs to be. She doesn't lose power because he takes it. She loses power because she places her strength in a future that hasn't arrived yet. She tells herself, he just needs more time. He just needs more healing. He just needs more support. He just needs more motivation. He just needs more of me. But the truth is this: the more she tries to elevate him, the more she lowers herself. If he is not meeting her halfway, her love becomes labor. Her patience becomes exhaustion. Her nurturing becomes sacrifice. Her loyalty becomes self-neglect. And the moment she begins prioritizing his potential over her reality, she steps out of her power. Her intuition softens. Her boundaries blur. Her standards slip. Her self-worth thins. Because potential is a future version of him, but she's living a present version of herself. Potential cannot hold her. Potential cannot love her. Potential cannot grow with her. Potential cannot build a life with her. It is only real when he chooses to grow into it. And until he does, she is pouring life into a version of him that does not yet exist. But here is the most painful revelation. The moment she loses her power to his potential, she begins losing her vision for her own. She stops dreaming. She stops expanding. She stops reaching. She stops becoming. Because she becomes so focused on helping him transform that she forgets she is also meant to transform. But her spirit will never stay silent forever. At some point, something awakens inside her. A gentle realization, a quiet uprising, a whisper that says, I cannot shrink myself to fit the future of someone who has not chosen to step into it. And that whisper becomes the turning point. The moment she sees how far she drifted is the moment she begins returning home to herself, and what she uncovers next changes everything. Because once she sees what she has given away, she begins reclaiming what is hers. 13. He reacts most when she reclaims herself. There is a quiet moment in every woman's journey when something shifts deep within her. Not because someone changed, not because someone apologized, not because someone finally met her where she once begged them to be, but because she looked at her own reflection and finally remembered who she was before she started bending to accommodate someone else's potential. It happens slowly, then suddenly. A single moment of clarity, a small breath of defiance, a whisper of self-respect returns to her, and everything begins to rearrange itself. A woman does not reclaim herself loudly. She does not need to announce her awakening. She does not need to warn him. She does not need to justify the shift. A woman reclaims herself through stillness, through silence, through softness that no longer seeks permission. She starts choosing differently, subtly, gently, almost invisibly, but the energy behind her choices changes entirely. She no longer waits for his effort. She no longer hopes for his consistency. She no longer clings to the possibility that he might one day realize her value. Instead, she realizes her own, and the moment she returns to herself, the entire dynamic shifts. Something inside a man wakes up in that moment, a subtle awareness, a sense that something familiar is slipping from his grasp. Not because she is walking away, but because she is walking back into her own power. Men are far more intuitive than we give them credit for. They feel the difference between a woman who loves them and a woman who is losing herself for them. They feel the difference between a woman who stays because she chooses to and a woman who stays because she doesn't believe she deserves more. When she begins reclaiming herself, she becomes the woman she was before fear taught her to shrink. Her voice softens, but her boundaries harden. Her presence becomes calmer, but her spirit becomes sharper. She becomes less reactive, less available, less consumed. This is the version of her that he feels the strongest, not the version that chases, not the version that hopes, not the version that doubts herself. It is the version of her that remembers, I am not afraid to lose what is not choosing me. And when he feels that shift, it awakens a kind of urgency in him. An urgency that wasn't there when she was overgiving, overthinking, or overcompensating. Suddenly, he begins noticing the things he ignored. The silence that once felt comforting now feels unsettling. The distance that once felt convenient now feels threatening. The space she creates becomes the mirror he never wanted to face. Because when she reclaims herself, she stops radiating need and begins radiating self-worth. She stops seeking reassurance and begins embodying confidence. And this is what he reacts to the most. Not her anger, not her sadness, not her tears, not her longing. He reacts to her wholeness. He reacts to her strength. He reacts to her self-return. Because when a woman stops orbiting around a man, he suddenly realizes how much of his identity was anchored in her attention. He feels her shifting attention like a tide pulling away from the shore. It reveals everything that was buried beneath the surface. The effort he didn't make, the intentions he never clarified, the promises he postponed, the potential he never stepped into. When she stops waiting for him, he begins wondering about her. When she stops prioritizing him, he begins thinking about her differently. When she stops giving him emotional entry, he begins trying to earn it. It is not manipulation, it is energy returning to its rightful home. And here lies the truth many women forget. A man does not value what he does not fear losing. But the fear of losing her isn't created by threats, or ultimatums, or dramatic departures. It is created when she quietly stops offering him what she used to offer so freely: her patience, her softness, her availability, her emotional labor. When she reclaims herself, she becomes a mystery again. She becomes depth again. She becomes the very thing that initially drew him toward her. A woman whose worth was not dependent on his attention. And this energy, this shift, this internal transformation awakens something in him far more profoundly than her words ever could. Because men do not respond to pressure, they respond to presence, and her presence becomes unmistakably powerful the moment she chooses herself again. But this is only the beginning of the shift. Because once her energy pulls inward, his instinct, almost naturally, begins leaning outward. And that is where the next transformation unfolds. The moment when her pullback becomes his pull forward. 14. When she pulls back, he leans forward. There is a natural law in relationships that few understand, yet many experience. The more a woman pulls back from a place of self-worth, the more a man feels compelled to lean in. Not because she's withholding affection, not because she's playing games, not because she's manipulating the dynamic, but because true energetic balance always returns to equilibrium. When she was extending herself toward him, he had no reason to move. She created the bridge, so he simply stood still. But when she pulls back, not out of punishment, but out of clarity, the balance begins to correct itself. A man does not lean forward when a woman chases him. He leans forward when she stops chasing herself away. There is something undeniably magnetic about a woman who chooses her peace, over the turbulence of chasing potential. When she steps back, he feels her absence in ways he never felt her presence. Her silence becomes louder than her words ever were. Her distance becomes more intimate than the closeness she once offered him. Her calm becomes more jarring than any argument could have been, because a woman who pulls back is not rejecting him. She is returning to herself. And when she returns to herself, she becomes someone worth pursuing again. Men are instinctively drawn to movement, not physical movement, but emotional movement. A woman who pulls back stops moving toward him. She shifts the direction of her energy from outward to inward. And this inward shift creates a vacuum he feels in his chest. It awakens a desire to approach, to understand, to reconnect. She is no longer flooding him with validation. She is no longer soothing his uncertainty. She is no longer giving him the emotional home he once took for granted. And because she stopped being predictable, he becomes attentive. Because she stopped being endless, he becomes intentional. The same man who once delayed his replies now reads her messages twice. The same man who once took days to reach out now feels restless at the thought of her slipping away. The same man who once kept her at a comfortable distance now feels the discomfort of losing the comfort she once provided. Her pullback forces him to confront himself, to confront his inconsistencies, to confront his resistance, to confront his feelings. A man only realizes the depth of a woman when her presence is no longer cushioning his emotional immaturity. The absence she creates acts like a mirror. It shows him who he has been. It shows him what he failed to protect. It shows him the role he played in the gap now stretching between them. And once he truly sees this, leaning forward becomes a natural response. Not because she asked, not because she begged, not because she cried, but because she stopped doing all the things that allowed him to remain passive. When she pulls back, she is not abandoning him. She is inviting alignment. She is inviting clarity. She is inviting truth. Her withdrawal is not a wall, it is a boundary. Her silence is not avoidance, it is self-respect. Her distance is not punishment, it is protection. And a man feels the difference between punishment and self-preservation. Punishment pushes him away. Self-preservation pulls him in. Because deep down, every man wants a woman whose self-worth does not collapse at his inconsistency. He wants a woman who can step away, who can stand alone, who can move without waiting for him to decide. A woman who can pull back is a woman who has mastered the art of loving without losing herself. And this mastery is what compels him to finally show whether he is meant to meet her at her level or release her to something greater. But this shift leads her somewhere unexpected too, because the moment she pulls back and witnesses him lean forward, something deep inside her begins to awaken, a recognition, a realization, a truth. Because once she sees his reaction to her withdrawal, she begins to question what she truly wants next. 15. A woman's stillness is more powerful than her effort. There comes a moment in a woman's life when she begins to realize that all the running, all the pleasing, all the proving, all the bending in half, trying to make someone understand her worth, was never the thing that made her powerful. It was the thing that made her exhausted. Because effort, when it comes from fear, weakens a woman. But stillness is the language of a woman who has finally remembered her value. Stillness is not silence. Stillness is not indifference. Stillness is not a game or a tactic. Stillness is the moment when she chooses herself before she chooses the outcome. It is the moment she decides, I will not chase what is unsure. I will not beg for what is mine. I will not negotiate with my own heart to stay somewhere my soul is trying to leave. There is a sacred kind of power in that softness. Not a dramatic exit, not a hardened heart, not a wall, just stillness. A peaceful withdrawal of energy from places where it is not cherished. And this is where many women misunderstand their own strength. They think the one who explains the most wins. They think the one who tries the hardest gets chosen. They think the one who stays available becomes valued. But effort coming from fear always pushes people away. Stillness, real stillness, pulls truth toward you. Because a woman in stillness is not frozen. She is not inactive. She is simply done performing. She's done giving discounts to someone who keeps asking for clearance prices on her heart. Her stillness becomes a mirror, and the man standing in front of that mirror can no longer hide from himself. He begins to feel the absence of her effort as the presence of her dignity. And dignity is something the soul responds to before the mind even understands what is happening. Stillness does not shout. It awakens. She doesn't need to correct him. Her stillness corrects him. She doesn't need to convince him. Her stillness confronts him. She doesn't need to chase him. Her stillness forces him to evaluate what he is losing. And suddenly, everything she used to give so freely begins to feel like a privilege, because now he must earn what he once received by default. This is the irony of the heart. The less she chases, the more he sees her. The quieter she becomes, the louder her absence sounds. The more she returns to herself, the more he searches for her. Stillness is not weakness. It is clarity dressed as calm. It is a woman remembering that she is not here to compete for a place in someone's life. She is here to stand in her truth. And whoever is meant for her will rise to meet her where she stands. Effort says, choose me. Stillness says, I choose myself. And you will either meet me here or you will lose me. And there is nothing more magnetic than a woman who has chosen herself without announcing it. Just breathing in her own worth, moving in her own rhythm, living in her own grace. Stillness becomes the moment she returns home, not to him, but to herself. And every return to herself creates a shift around her. Because when she stops trying so hard to be understood, appreciated, chosen, life starts revealing who was never capable of those things in the first place. And the ones who are, they come forward with clarity. Because stillness invites sincerity. Stillness exposes intentions. Stillness brings truth to the surface. Stillness is the doorway where love either steps toward her or fades away. And the more she roots herself in that stillness, the more she begins to understand something astonishing. She never needed to move mountains to be loved. She just needed to stop moving herself out of alignment. Stillness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new kind of power rising within her. A power that no amount of effort could ever create. A power that makes the world around her shift. A power that makes him shift. Because stillness is the first sign that she is becoming someone he can no longer take lightly. And this is where the next truth begins to unfold. The truth she once feared yet now understands with grace. It is not what she gives that shapes a man's commitment. It is what she demands of herself. And now we enter that truth more deeply. 16. Her self-respect determines his investment. A man does not invest in a woman because she loves him. He invests because she respects herself. Love draws him in, yes. But self-respect determines how far he goes. You can pour affection, loyalty, attention, kindness, and still watch a man remain unchanged, unmoved, uncommitted, if your love flows from a place where your standards do not live. But when a woman carries herself with self-respect, something in him wakes up. Not because she demands something from him, but because her presence demands something from himself. Self-respect is not arrogance. Self-respect is alignment. It is the way she says no without apology. The way she says yes without desperation. The way she sets boundaries not as punishment, but as protection. It is the way she chooses peace over drama, clarity over confusion, consistency over potential. It is the way she shows up in her own life with fullness, not waiting for someone to complete her, validate her, or rescue her from loneliness. Self-respect is the quiet confidence that whispers, I am worthy of a love that is certain. I am worthy of a love that is steady. I am worthy of a love that sees me. And a man feels this before she ever says a word. Self-respect changes the way she stands, the way she walks, the way she pauses before responding, the way she chooses herself even when her heart aches to choose him. A woman's self-respect redefines the way a man interacts with her. Because when she respects herself, he must either rise or reveal that he never intended to stay. Self-respect is a filter. It separates the ones who are ready from the ones who are temporary. It pushes away the inconsistent, the immature, the uncertain men who are still negotiating their own identity. But it pulls forward the men who are ready to build, ready to grow, ready to stand, ready to love. Self-respect does not ask a man to be perfect. It simply shows him that she values herself too deeply for half-effort love. And something happens to a man when he meets a woman like that. He becomes intentional. He chooses consistency. He chooses clarity. He becomes more aware of his own behavior, his own patterns, his own choices. Because now he sees what is at stake. A woman who is not afraid to walk away from anything that insults her soul. A woman who will not settle for emotional breadcrumbs. A woman who knows the difference between a man who is busy and a man who is avoiding her. A woman who does not romanticize excuses. A woman who refuses to confuse potential with loyalty. Self-respect becomes the standard. And when the standard rises, so does he. A man invests more deeply when he realizes he is dealing with someone who will not allow him to be careless with her heart. And this is the unspoken truth many women forget. A man treats you the way you treat yourself. If you place yourself last, so will he. If you allow inconsistency, he will offer it. If you abandon your needs to keep him comfortable, he will let you shrink. But if you honor yourself, your boundaries, your worth, your voice, your heart, he must decide whether he is capable of honoring them too. And this decision, this moment of realization, is what determines the future of the relationship. Because self-respect does not guarantee that every man will rise. But it guarantees that any man who cannot rise will fall away. And any man who does rise will never forget the woman who required him to, because she did not pressure him. She inspired him. She did not demand from him. She demanded from herself. And it was her standard, not her effort, that shaped his investment. And as she steps fully into that truth, something beautiful happens. She understands that love is not about losing herself in someone else. It is about finding someone who protects the woman she has finally become. And from here, the story continues. Because once a woman embraces self-respect, she begins to see everything differently. She sees herself differently. She sees relationships differently. She sees the world differently. And now, the next transformation begins. 17. He rises to match the woman who chooses herself first. There is a moment every man encounters, though not every man recognizes it immediately. A moment when the woman he once assumed would orbit around his inconsistencies suddenly returns to the center of her own universe. She chooses herself first, not out of pride, not out of revenge, not out of coldness, but out of awakening. This choice alters the atmosphere around her. Her energy shifts from pursuit to presence, from trying to fit to refusing to shrink, from fearing loss to embracing alignment. And men feel this shift in a way that is almost spiritual, because a woman who places herself at the top of her own priorities becomes a mirror that reflects a man's truth back to him. She becomes the measurement of his willingness. She becomes the revelation of his intentions. She becomes the quiet standard he must now rise to meet. Before, he could lean on her softness to compensate for his lack of effort. Before, he could depend on her compassion to excuse his immaturity. Before, he could rely on her emotional generosity to hide his emotional absence. But now, something has changed. Her energy is no longer shaped by trying to keep him comfortable. Her attention is no longer anchored in hoping he will become someone he has not chosen to be. Her heart is no longer waiting at a door he keeps opening and closing. She has walked back into her own life. She has started choosing herself in every place she used to choose him. She has begun honoring her own boundaries with the same care she once reserved for him. And suddenly he feels something new, a pull to rise, a desire to show up, a longing to grow. Not because she demanded it, but because she no longer depends on him to find her value. When a woman chooses herself first, it resets the dynamic. It creates a higher emotional frequency, one that exposes laziness, half love and half effort. Her presence becomes a calling. Her standards become a compass. Her self-respect becomes the foundation of a new reality. A man who truly cares will rise to match that frequency. He will begin taking responsibility for the places where he once hid. He will begin closing the gaps he used to ignore. He will begin listening not just to her words, but to the silence between them. He begins noticing the weight of the moments he overlooked, the effort she gave without asking for anything back, the tenderness she offered even when she was the one hurting. And he realizes, perhaps for the first time, that her choosing herself is not an act against him, but an invitation for him to become someone worthy of choosing her back. He rises, not because he fears losing her, but because he finally sees the beauty of standing beside a woman who is whole. Something inside him begins to shift. He becomes more intentional, more aware, more steady. He learns to speak with more clarity. He learns to offer presence rather than promises. He learns that love is not measured in intensity but in consistency. And as he rises, something else becomes clear. A man who truly wants a woman will grow into the version of himself that can honor her. A man who does not want her will fall away from her naturally. Her self-selection becomes the filter. Her healing becomes the boundary. Her transformation becomes the truth. And in this truth, he begins to understand that choosing her is not enough. He must also choose himself enough to be capable of loving her in a healthy, grounded way. But not every man can rise. Not every man will rise. Some men remain where they are, not because she is too much, but because they are not ready to become more. This is why a woman choosing herself is never a loss. It is clarity. Clarity that shows her who is aligned with her spirit and who is aligned with her wounds. Clarity that reveals who can grow with her and who only grows through her. And this clarity leads her into the next revelation. A revelation she cannot hear until she stops thinking about him, stops centering him, stops shaping her worth around his potential. For when she finally releases him from the altar of her thoughts, something unexpected happens. She stops seeing him through emotion, and he begins seeing her through truth. And this realization opens the doorway to the next truth. 18. When she stops thinking about him, he finally sees her clearly. There is a paradox woven through human relationships, a truth that is rarely spoken but often lived. A woman cannot be fully seen by a man when she is too busy losing herself in thoughts of him. As long as he occupies her mind, as long as she analyzes his silence, decodes his signals, interprets his inconsistency, or rearranges herself around his availability, she remains invisible to him. Not because she lacks depth or value or light, but because he cannot see a woman clearly if she cannot see herself. When she finally stops thinking about him, not out of bitterness, not out of avoidance, but out of awakening, something powerful happens. The noise inside her quiets. The emotional fog begins to lift. The illusion of what she hoped he could be dissolves. She returns to her own soul. She starts noticing her own feelings again, her own desires, her own discomforts, her own truth. And in that return, her presence changes. It becomes sharper, cleaner, more grounded. She no longer overgives. She no longer imagines hidden meanings in his bare minimum efforts. She no longer treats potential as proof. She no longer romanticizes uncertainty. She has moved from longing into clarity, and men feel clarity like a shift in gravity. Something inside him awakens when her energy stops orbiting him, when her attention is no longer a guarantee, when her emotional devotion is no longer automatic, when her mind no longer revolves around decoding his ambiguity. He senses the absence of what he once took for granted, the absence of her emotional availability, the absence of her overthinking him, the absence of her waiting for him, the absence of her shaping herself around his inconsistency. It is only when her mind releases him that his mind begins to notice her. He sees the change in her, the calm in her eyes, the softness that is no longer dependent on his behavior, the strength that no longer bends for his convenience. He sees her not as the woman waiting for him, but as the woman he may no longer have access to. And clarity often hits hardest when the window of comfort closes. He sees her worth not because she tried to show it, but because she stopped hiding it behind her longing for him. He sees her beauty not because she tried to prove it, but because she no longer needs his recognition to feel radiant. He sees her value not because she demanded it, but because she withdrew from the spaces where her value was overlooked. For the first time, he sees her with eyes unclouded by complacency. He sees her confidence blooming. He sees her standards rising. He sees her soul returning to itself. And he realizes he is now witnessing a woman who is no longer intertwined with his indecision. A woman who stands in her own identity. A woman who listens to her intuition. A woman who no longer sacrifices her peace for the sake of connection. This realization shakes him. Not because she is punishing him, not because she is playing a game, but because she has stepped into a version of herself that forces him to confront what has he truly offered her, what has he truly shown her, and what has he truly been. He sees her clearly now, but the question becomes, is he ready to meet the woman she has become? Because the truth is undeniable. A woman who stops thinking about a man does not disappear. She becomes unbound. Unbound from his approval. Unbound from his inconsistency. Unbound from the script she once wrote inside her mind. She becomes herself in full form, unfiltered, unashamed, spacious. And when she steps into this space, life responds, the world responds, her own spirit responds. And whether he rises to meet the woman she has become, or fades into the background of her evolution, is no longer her concern, for she has entered the place where she no longer wonders, will he choose me? She now asks, does this connection choose my peace, my growth, my truth? And that question is the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where she is finally seen, not because she fought for attention, but because she reclaimed her own. So remember this. When a woman can't stop thinking about a man, she isn't actually thinking about him. She is thinking about the version of herself she becomes in his presence, or the version she wishes she could be. But when she turns that attention inward, when she reclaims her mind, when she breathes into her own soul, everything changes, not because he finally sees her, but because she finally sees herself. And in that moment of clarity, she realizes the truth. The man was never the story. She was, and she still is, and she always will be.